Welcome everyone to another episode of Hey CTO podcast. I'm Pedro Torres. I'm with Sara Gonçalves, and today both of us we have the huge pleasure to be talking with Carlos Vilhena, or Carlos Vilhena. I don't know how to say this with an English accent. Sorry for that. But yeah, Carlos, it's awesome to having you here. Thank you.
Awesome. It's really great to have you be here and have a chance to have a nice conversation with you guys. So thanks for the invitation as well.
Absolutely. So Carlos, I had the pleasure to meet you way before the podcast, and definitely I'm really happy for that. But for someone that doesn't really know who Carlos is, so can you tell us a little bit about yourself so that people know you?
Absolutely. So my name is Carlos. I'm engineer leader, currently based in Porto, Portugal. Background in mathematics and computer science, specialization in formal methods, so completely different, like a rabbit hole in software engineering, I would say. How do you improve correctness of critical systems and such?
Oh, wow.
Started off as an engineer, kind of went through a few countries, studied in Denmark, worked in Denmark as well, moved to London, also about 8 years in London, working very different companies, and now kind of back to the roots, back to Portugal. Continue helping engineering organizations grow.
That's nice. And could you tell us a bit more about what you have been doing lately, more specific?
Sure, absolutely. So in the past few months, I've joined a company called Fidel API. So it's a fintech that was founded in London by Dev Subrata and Andrea Elias, so the founders of the company. The company, specializes in technology that helps us make money programmable, right? So I've been helping the company grow the engineering team. So we have offices in London, in Portugal, like Lisbon first initially, like where we started, now kind of expanding as well in the country, New York, and then other plans for expansion too. I've joined with a mission, help scale the engineering organization. So there are very exciting plans for Fidel over the next few years. That comes with growth requirements. How many people we hire, where, how do we work, how do we become the most effective and the best engineering organization that we can be in the next few years. So that's part of my mission. That's what I've been doing. But maybe on Fidel's mission itself. Making money programmable is obviously a broad topic.
Yeah.
but maybe kind of focusing a little bit on the use cases that we've done most recently. So we enable our customers to access real-time card payment data for their customers so they can make programmable experiences, right? So imagine someone is paying with a particular debit or credit card in a payment terminal. We know about that transaction real time and can enable our customers to make some sort of experience around that particular transaction event that just happened, right? So very focused on real time, very focused on card payment data, and that
it's a B2B. Carlos, so it's a B2B, right?
It's B2B. So we are, if I can kind of describe Fidel, a global financial infrastructure platform, right? So we are a platform that builds APIs that enable our customers, other businesses, to build programmable experiences, right? So they can be customers in loyalty space, rewards, expense management, any vertical, any industry that could take advantage of real-time payment data, right?
Sure.
It could be, for example, if you're British Airways, for example, one of our customers, and you want to make a particular business decision on a transaction, like let's say give rewards to that customer, they can do that real time with our APIs without having to do integrations with Visa, MasterCard, American Express, or any other card networks that are available in the market, right? So we take a little bit, we take the effort from doing all of these integrations. So there is speed of integration by going directly to Fidel. We ensure compliance because there's obviously a lot of data principles involved in accessing user data and how that's treated and handled. Super tricky, and we're very, very careful with how we handle customer data. Another side effect is there's obviously a huge cost reduction by going directly to Fidel because you don't have to pay the huge fees that you would have to pay to go directly to Visa, MasterCard, and American Express to do those integrations. And we can augment the transaction records with geolocation and other data sets,
I
carbon
see.
footprint data and stuff, which makes the transaction record much more interesting for other use cases, right? So that's the value proposition of that.
Cool. And tell me one thing. So definitely super interesting mission. I think, like we've seen a couple of funding rounds, and so definitely Fidel has been growing quite a lot. So, from your perspective as an engineering leader there, how does that affect, yourself, the team, like with that success, do you feel like you're kind of a victim of your own success and having more pressure to deliver because of that? Do you really kind of try to, to maintain everything as is, regardless, of the funding rounds and the success? How does that work?
Yeah, that's it's very interesting, right? I think I try to kind of abstract that away a little bit. First time I talked to Dev and Andre during my interview process, the two founders of the company, I realized they were onto something great, right? The culture was outstanding. The product vision was, something very inspirational, something that I personally really relate to. And they built a nice team that, built the first few products of Fidel, in a really, really nice way. So, I could really tell that they were onto something, great and very successful. So that puts obviously an initial pressure on, we have got to succeed, right? But the funding round doesn't necessarily come as a surprise because of all of the success and the vision. It's when the stars align, everything that comes after that becomes almost like inevitable. So to be honest, I think I feel the same level of responsibility since I joined. I saw the project firsthand even before this last funding round, and I really understood kind of the mission and the commitment that we need to do to make this possible. And one thing that really helps me cope with, the supposed pressure that we might feel is, we're very deliberate in how we're building the company. We have very clear goals on, the next milestones we want to achieve. And I think that ultimately provides focus, right? When you've got focus on those goals, when it's very clear where we need to go and how and why, then everything else is, doesn't necessarily impact that roadmap in a way. So, we feel we absolutely are in control. We're doing a great job in scaling the company as a business, and just mostly feeling really happy to be part of that team.
That's an amazing story, and it's good that you are here to share all that. And before we go deeper into your current role and getting to know more details, I'm also curious about, the beginning of your journey, you mentioned several countries. So you already lived outside of Portugal for a while. How did that happen? So how was the jump from Minho to the world? How that happened?
I think it was definitely intentional. I wanted to go abroad for a while.
Okay.
That while was 6 months. Everything else was less intentional, right? So backstory is, when I finished my bachelor in mathematics and computer science, I really enjoyed a particular area called formal methods. So how do you prove the correctness of software for mission critical systems? Let's say software that runs on rockets or airplanes and stuff like that. So how can you prove that a particular software is not going to crash in unwanted scenarios, right? And my university had a relationship with the university in Denmark, and one of the best professors in the area, Peter Gordon Larsen, he's from Denmark. So I kind of said, I really want to do my master's degree with this particular person. I think I'm going to learn a huge amount. So 6 months, that's what I really wanted to do. I really loved it. So I got a part-time job to complete the master's for the other 6 months, and then everything just kind of became natural from there. So I started working in Denmark. Really enjoyed my time there. It's an amazing country in many respects. I think the tech scene perhaps not as exciting as other places in Europe. And I think after that, after a few years, close to 4 years, I really had this realization that I wanted to be building startups. I wanted to get closer to how you build a company. So the natural decision for me, not wanting to leave Europe, would be London. I think, at the time, it's still true today, but at the time it was, the obvious choice. So that's why I moved to London to kind of pursue a very, very specific goal of I would like to found a company and go through that experience at least once in my lifetime. So yeah, some very deliberate goals, but a lot of it happens kind of organically, I would say.
Oh, fantastic! And one thing that also is very clear to us is so different countries. We see that you have this trait about kind of being adventurous, kind of wanting to feel uncomfortable, not settling for what you have. Another thing that definitely stood out is that, well, you started your own gig in the UK, and we want to hear about that for sure. But looking to your trajectory, we see, acting as CTO, head of engineering, director, VP. Like, in your opinion, were all those ads quite different, or do you see that it's kind of just the things that you've always done using different names? What's your take there?
Really, really different, I would say. It's incredible, right? We see titles. I think in the industry, that's difficult, right? You see titles, but I think a title has a context, and the context is the culture of the company, the size of the company, and the market you're on, right? So actually, when you see, let's say, VP of engineering title in 5 different companies posted on LinkedIn, let's say, oh gosh, they couldn't be, they're probably so different between each other, right? So if I could kind of maybe talk a little bit through some of those. So CTO at the startup, very young company, you are doing, you're jack of all trades, right? One day I'm fixing a bug on the code, another day I'm interviewing and hiring engineers. Next day I've got a board meeting, and then I've got to pitch to investors, and I've got an angry customer calling me. So it's like you're doing absolutely everything. And maybe the co-founder role more than anything. But completely different from having been a CTO at YLD, for example, that's a company that we grew from 40, 50 people to 140 people in the short period of time. So very focused on different problems to solve. But then again, director of engineering, all of those are supposedly executive roles, right? Depending on how much the company trusts and empowers you to make decisions, but they are supposed to be executive roles. So at the end of the day, a common thread I would like to see on all of those, or most of those, probably not all of them, but most of them, is having the freedom to make decisions behind the P&L. There's a little bit more accountability there. Not all companies give that freedom, but idealistically, that's maybe the common thread on most of these roles. You should have a budget, you should have a P&L to manage and make decisions at that level, right? But I think they're all very different. And when I joined, for example, TalkDesk, huge company, hyperscale, completely different set of problems than a startup that you're growing from 50 to 200, right? It just doesn't compare, right? So very, very different roles. I think all of them have interesting nuances. I learned an awful lot from all of them, for sure. But I wouldn't compare any of them, to be honest.
Interesting. Now I need to ask, how was that experience of founding your own company? I need to know about that.
It's great. It's great. I think that's how my career changed, really. That was the pivoting point, I think, because up until then I was an engineer. I did kind of relate to the business problems we were solving. I think there is always a temptation as engineers to just go and build the cool stuff that we want to build, because that's awesome. I always had a connection to the business, like I'm doing this, it must have a purpose, otherwise why am I doing this? And creating a startup was, for me, it was an experience of how can I get something from 0 to 1, right? How can I create a demand and build something around it sustainable that makes it grow? But that's the inspirational part of it. Then there is the other side of it, which is it's very demanding. You have to do absolutely everything, as I was describing. You need to get the first product up and running. You need to make sure that there is market validation. You need to talk to investors, kind of sell a vision for someone that has never had to sell a vision of a particular thing. Very challenging and demanding. Then learning, and I think that's why it was life-changing to me, because I had to learn about accounting. I had to learn about legal. I had to learn about sales and investment. So I was forced by nature to kind of learn all of these things. So the experience was incredibly enriching. I think, I will do it again for sure in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
With the right people, the idea is great, obviously, but the people is what matters most at the end of the day. With the right people, I think it's one of the best experiences one can have in the lifetime, regardless of outcomes in the end, right? So I think that's probably the role that prepared me the most for what I do today, right? Because of all of those nuances of the role that I also have to have, be aware of today. So yeah, I think that was definitely the best experience I had in my career.
No, that's fantastic. I have a friend of mine that said, that a good executive or a great executive is one that could also be a CEO. And so the things that you've been mentioning, kind of having exposure to support, to legal, knowing how to pitch to investors, being on the board, and although, for instance, now you're focusing in engineering, definitely you are a much more complete executive, exactly
Absolutely.
because of that. But tell me one thing that I think it's super interesting. That is, so you were a hardcore software engineer, extremely successful career. Do you think that the co-founder opportunity was the thing that kind of drove you away from a staff principal sort of role and definitely got more into the, I don't know how to call this, more kind of people leadership than technology leadership? Although I know that usually we have a little bit of each, but definitely I see you much more focusing in inspiring an engineering team, delivering in all hands and things like that. Do you think that was kind of the tipping point there?
Absolutely. I think, even not just the work that I had to do, which was much larger than just engineering, but the groups of people I was dealing with and talking with and making connections with are completely different, right? Because when you're a founder, you're talking to business folks, you're talking to finance folks, so opens completely your network, and I think that's obviously leads to different challenges as well and different job opportunities in the market. And I think once I realized that as an engineer, I think you can have huge amount of impact, right? I think up to the level of a VP and CTO, so no questions asked. But you cannot do that without business acumen, right? I think that I really believe in that. You still need to understand the value of what you are delivering. You still need to communicate it to the stakeholders. Why is this valuable? You need to have the backing of investment to be able to do that. So there is no escaping from this. And going to and doing my startup and then kind of changing a little bit kind of how I talk and what sort of subjects I talk about made me want to kind of pursue a more management career rather than engineering. I still code. I still like to program in my free time.
Oh, okay.
I teach my kids how to program, and that's, I'm never going to forget that. And something that I really appreciate. I don't do it in my professional life today. Obviously, that doesn't make sense anymore. But that's where I found that, I guess, calling and made the jump. But the jump is always, it's messy, right? There's always the messy middle, because it's not like a day from one day to the other I say I'm going to be a manager and everything is fine. I think there's always, there's a couple of years of transition where you're like, did I do the right thing? Did I not do the right thing? Should I go back? Should I go forward? That internal, I guess, battle always happens. It happened to me as well, but I'm extremely comfortable with the decision I made. I'm super happy with it.
Nice. And when you look to your whole journey, and you mentioned there talking about those jumps and so on, so we already noticed that you are someone that likes challenges and don't want to be on the comfort zone. What are the triggers that make you like jumping from one place to another?
That's a good one.
That's a good one. So I think I'm very driven by objectives, by goals. When I moved to London, it was very deliberate. I wanted to create a startup. I didn't start a startup in my first year in London. It took me 3 or 4 years to get to that stage, right? So I like, high level, long-term goals. When I set them, that helps me create focus and go and try and do that. So what that creates is, I can funnel my attention in the best possible way in order to achieve that goal, right? So number one, always have a goal in mind. That's my mantra. Number two, if I stay too comfortable for too long, or if I'm not learning, I think not learning is probably the best indicator that I have in my career. If I'm not learning for a considerable amount of time, then it's a good indication that I might be needing a particular change, right? So always driven by goals with those kind of guardrails of, am I learning or not? And I think as leaders, actually as any professionals, right? There is so much you can learn and improve over time. So many companies and so successful and so many different problems that it would be naive of me thinking that I've got everything that I need to succeed, right? And it's just such a fast changing industry as well. So
for sure.
Yeah. Learning is my biggest indicator of should I do something different or not.
These are the sort of moments when I realize I'm not so brilliant because I don't establish goals in such a strategic way for my career. I'm just
pros and cons, right? If I set the goals long term, I will miss a lot of opportunities around me, right?
No, it sounds smart. I envy you. But one question that I need to ask, and it's kind of a little bit of selfish, but for any sort of parent that is watching this show. So you mentioned that you're teaching your kid to code.
Right.
How are you doing that? Are you kind of teaching Python? Do you have any sort of tool for that? Are you just kind of showing him YouTube videos and kind of how does that work?
So this is my oldest child. He's 7 years old. He's a bit of a geek. So Minecraft all the way, and he developed a bit of interest of, how does Minecraft work? Oh, no, then he found the commands. Oh, I can run commands and they do stuff on that. So a lot of curiosity. So I thought, did a bit of research, how do I even start? I didn't want to kind of overwhelm the kid, and I didn't want to make him think, oh, this is too complicated, I'm not going to do it. So I think Scratch is one of the best tools that people can use. He uses Scratch 3, which is a drag and drop tool for programming. It has all of the basic constructs and you can make visual flows, and he absolutely adores that. So he comes up with, ideas of games that we need to build, and then kind of walk him through how you would build something like that. So I think that's the first one. He's now asking me to, he wants to customize Minecraft and stuff like that. Okay, no. So let's wait a little bit. So try not to take everything at once. But I think core foundation, and I've studied mathematics as well. I think mathematics is the core foundation for understanding how to program. And he loves mathematics, and I think that his brain is already wired in that way. So it's a little bit easier to get him to do. And then obviously YouTube. I mean, kids are so lucky today. When I went to university, I had to go to the campus to get access to the internet, or I got into Gmail beta version by inviting, when I was late in my university.
I remember that.
Right? And today kids have YouTube. They get so much.
They have Stack Overflow.
It's insane.
They have everything on their ends.
So future looks exciting actually. Yeah, but I really think even. I'm not sure if you'll ever follow, a programming career. It's up to him to decide. But just thinking in that way, like how do you deconstruct a problem? I think it's super valuable skill. So that's I guess the real reason why I'm asking and helping or supporting him in this learning path.
Yeah, I totally agree. And even by talking with my friends, it's we can notice the difference from someone that already has a background with that logic for someone that never thought it that way. I still remember the time that I used Scratch for the first time. It was on a visit to the college that I also didn't know how to program, and they also use that tool. And it was very interesting to start thinking in a different way, because it's a different way to put things.
Exactly.
And now, not talking about your kids, but we are also talking about learning. So now I'm curious, what do you use to start to keep relevant in the game and continue to learning? So now I'm curious about what do you usually do?
So many things, I would say, but also, well, I'll get to that. But in terms of tools, network first. I think I'm lucky to be surrounded by amazing people that they are happy to share stories, and I think learning by experience and understanding how things work in practice has been extremely valuable. I've also been lucky to have had a couple of mentors throughout my career that helped me guide in particular directions. Some of the most, even CEOs that I found extremely memorable and have supported me, and even, in good and bad times. So network first, I think I learned a huge amount from them. I obviously do a lot of self-studying. I think the books in management have been, outstanding, and I like the, Stripe Press books, absolutely gold in terms of content. So I do spend a lot of time self-learning there. I love to hear about case studies of companies. So podcasts, I find that there's a huge amount of great content on excellent businesses and how they were built, and all of that process. So again, learning from experience, but from really high-profile companies, high-profile executives of those companies. I haven't done as much learning and development in terms of courses, and I guess lack of time potentially, but that's something that, again, would love to explore. But to be honest, after all these years, and I've always been like, the fear of missing out, what am I missing in my industry? But I think fundamentally, if you go back to basics, I think that's where you get the most out of everything, right? So focus on mental models, focus on principles. What are the best practices for decision making? What are the best practices for deconstructing a problem? I think those are the tools, the underlying tools that I don't really talk about very much, but help me be who I am today, and be as effective as I can. So I really have this, I'm very intentional about kind of deconstructing and building, going back to the roots, rather than kind of using the next or the last change in management and management 3.0 or whatever it is. I don't necessarily pay too much attention to those details. I kind of look at the underlying principles, and I think that's served me well so far.
Oh. That answer, I think it definitely sets the stage for a kind of one question, maybe two, that I have here related to that. That is, so if you think, throughout your career, like that big lesson that you learned, like, that really, that you mentioned one, definitely, kind of, that's your mantra, kind of establish goals, go after them and so on. But in terms of everything that you've done so far, all of your experiences,
yeah,
could you really kind of mention like one big lesson that you took from all of it, if possible?
Where do I start?
Exactly.
so many. I think until very late in my career, I forgot that people matter most above everything, right? If you don't have a good connection, and if you don't really connect deeply with the people that you work with, you are off to a bad start. And I've learned that the bad way, because I thought skills mattered most above everything else. And that was the biggest mistake, the biggest lesson in my career. And that's why, again, kind of circling back to my interview process with Fidel API, I learned that lesson, and I connected with the founders, and I thought, this is one of the decisions I'm going to make based on people. Obviously, there is everything else that aligns, but mostly a people-related leap of faith in a way. And I think once I learned that lesson a little bit later in my career, I think most of my decisions after that were much better, right? And so I would say that's the biggest lesson.
I really relate to that. There was a great sentence that I once read that, from the moment you're a leader, you're in the relationship business.
Absolutely.
Like, Jesus, no, I wish I could know that before.
Yeah.
So many screw-ups.
Well, absolutely. And sometimes it's like you force your way through it because you think, I can work through it. But when the alignment isn't there is one side of that equation that's suffering, right? And usually it's the one that's trying to push forward and ignoring the signs. And I've ignored, had enough of that in my career. So yeah, definitely recommend people to pay attention to those early signs, I would say.
And could you give us like concrete examples, like the things that you use in your daily basis that shows that you really focus like on people, or even when we are coaching others, some tips for even for our listeners that are listening to this, some tips that they can use to also pay attention to that side of things.
Yeah, I think what's the culture that you embody, and how does that relate to the other person, right? If you are misaligned at a very, very deep level of values, then that's when everything starts to fall apart, right? So one thing that I recommend is to people to understand themselves, what are the core values that I want to see represented in others? It could be 3 to 5. And again, as engineer, I used to laugh at missions, visions, values, and say, why do we even bother doing these things? My gosh, I was so wrong, right? Because if you are aligned at the value level, and if the principles are there, everything else is workable from there, right? So let's say if you value working with someone with integrity, with charisma, with a transparent person, with exhibiting radical candor, right? If that's you'll have a much better chance of solving through and working with others that kind of represent the same values. So make an effort, my suggestion, make an effort to understand what are your core values, what do they represent, and figure out what are the core values of the others around you. And if there is significant misalignment, that's probably a red sign, an early indication that maybe something is not quite right. But at some point, eventually, you'll have to make difficult decisions or have difficult conversations, and that's when these things will come to the surface, right? So.
And UK, Denmark, Portugal, not in this particular order, obviously. How do you compare the tech scenes? You already give a little bit of a disclosure on the Denmark's tech scene, but how would you compare the 3 different realities?
Yeah. Context matters here, right? Because I think when I left Portugal, 2007, very different country from what we have today. But I think broadly speaking, so Denmark, they've got a lot of know-how. Very, very smart people, lots of great companies built there, but they don't necessarily do all of the building in Denmark. So they offload a lot of that to other countries. At least that was the reality that I've seen before. So a lot of critical know-how, but not necessarily the execution that happens there. Right? So from an engineering standpoint, that was a bit of a difficult one to comprehend. I think the tech scene in Denmark since then evolved dramatically. Copenhagen is home for a lot of interesting startups, and I think it's definitely evolving in a good place. The UK, my gosh, it's amazing. I have to say this because in Europe, it is and it will continue to be one of the best places to work at and to build a business there, right? Thriving economy, and I think maybe moving away from tech, the right regulatory and tax policies to enable entrepreneurship, right? Wow. You cannot build successful businesses in mass at scale without the kind of the basic principles, the basic society principles being aligned with that, right? And I think that's one of the biggest detractors of Portugal in this tech scene, right? But the UK, absolutely amazing. Lots of the natural consequence of it is a good place to create a business is you get talent density because everybody wants to work there. If you get talent density, you put everything in motion, and no one can catch up with London anymore in Europe, right? I think it's very difficult to do so. So absolutely recommend London as one of the best places to be in Europe. Then looking back at Portugal, things have changed significantly. When I left Portugal, there were very few startups, very poorly funded, not necessarily maybe great ideas, but poorly funded. There's a lot of consultancies, a lot of big organizations. I think there's still a little bit the case, although we have quite a few successful organizations, the unicorns, right? But they're not necessarily founded in Portugal. They have Portuguese founders, but they had to look elsewhere, and there is a good reason for that, right? I think if we really look at that, we'll probably have much interesting conversations in Portugal in terms of the future. But I think one thing that's great is the talent in Portugal is outstanding. We have to say this. We have very successful folks in many different business areas. I think that's why a lot of interesting companies want to set up shop in Portugal, right? Because they want to take advantage. It's no longer we are a cheap country with cheap labor. That's gone. That ship has sailed, right? Yeah. We have really thank God, exactly. So really high quality people throughout different industries, and companies are understanding that. I think they're still suffering significantly for the lack of regulatory and tax policies to enable them. But I think that's definitely a much better place now to be and have a career. I just kind of wish that from a policy standpoint, we were a little bit more forward-looking and trying to incentivize more of this, creation of wealth, because I think everybody would benefit from something like that, right? But that's how I would compare the three, right? I think Portugal has high potential, needs some pushing to get there.
Yeah.
London, the absolutely best place to be in Europe, and Denmark, especially Copenhagen, is getting a lot of very interesting startups. So yeah, three great places, different realities, but yeah.
That was a good analysis.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And this has been being a great conversation, but we are reaching the end. But we like to end with different questions, more fun questions. And I will start with the first one. Okay, Pedro? And then you go.
Sure, you go ahead.
So the first that I have for you, Carlos, is what do you believe is your superpower?
Adaptability, maybe, right? And I mean, that's, I think I always thought that change is the only constant in life, right? And so if you're not ready to adapt to new realities, it's gonna be tough. And I think kind of going through multiple countries, multiple companies, different stages, kind of shows that I was able to adapt. So maybe that's my superpower. Others will probably say different, but yeah, that's my.
No, I love that one.
I would like to think it like that.
That was a nice one.
Cool. No, for sure. Second thing. So if you were to give yourself an alternative job title, so you'd be able to choose whatever you would like. Exactly. What would it be?
So I love Lego, right? My kids love Lego. I absolutely enjoy building things. So would love to be there you go. I would love to be a designer at Lego. They must have so much fun. I mean, that's my perception. I might be wrong. But imagine like sitting in a Lego office. You've got all of the pieces you could possibly imagine, and you have to make creations. I'm probably terrible at it, but I would love to be, at least for a few days, to have a chance to be a designer at Lego.
Yeah, crazy. Love that. Yeah.
We are going to have good answers to these questions. Now, the final one that I think it's more challenging.
Yeah.
So UK, Denmark, and Portugal. Think about your favorite dessert of each country.
There's so many. So
you're a dessert fan.
Classic. I like desserts. I can't be too close to them because I've got an issue of self-control there. But Portugal, I think I'll start with Portugal. I really like pudding about frescos. I can't have it.
That's
very
sweet.
Very frequently. So it's extremely sweet. Once every 6 months, and that's it. But I really like that. In the UK, somewhere between the very wintry desserts, somewhere between apple pie or sticky toffee pudding, which is something that, after a pub lunch, one dessert like that, cold weather outside, it's awesome.
Oh, nice.
In Denmark, then I think my favorite sweets are from Denmark, actually. They had those cinnamon rolls. Forget how they call them, but they've got like a long cinnamon roll that you can cut slices on it with sugar on top. Absolutely amazing. I mean, they did wonderful desserts there. So my three favorite ones.
Now I'm angry.
Exactly. No, like, gosh, we should have desserts here to try out, right? Like, and tell us about this one while we were eating.
Exactly.
No, for sure. For sure. And so this is the end. Definitely, we ended with a sweet moment. I had to punchline. But no, look, Carlos, it was amazing to be with you today. The conversation was so rich. I had a blast. I've learned things to teach my kids and to how for them to start programming. We've learned a little bit about your career, about Fidel. No, it was a real pleasure to have you here. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you for the invitation. It was great to be here as well.
Cool. So internet, this is it. The end of the episode. So stay tuned for more episodes of our second season, and that's it. See you all later.